This is All of It. I'm Allison Stewart, live from the WNYC studios in Soho. Thank you for make us a part of your day. I'm really grateful that you're here. On today's show, journalist Vincent Coppola joins us to discuss his new memoir, Gowanus Crossing. Soul artist Jalen Nganda has a new album out, and he will perform live. And we'll talk about New York City in 1973, the last time the Knicks won the NBA championship. That's the plan, so let's get this started with the new book, But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Hell Between Sick and Well, and How to Break Free. A recent guest essay in the New York Times hit a nerve for a lot of people. It told the story of what happens when, because of medical breakthroughs, people who have terminal cancer now live with it for years, making it a chronic illness. And what do you do with living with that as an issue? How do you live your life that way? It's a story that Amy Kurtz knows well. In her lifetime, she has lived with chronic illness, not the terminal kind, but a debilitating kind. Amy has become a patient advocate and wrote a book that helps with the recovery, or at least the right now state of a long-term health journey. It's called But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Hell Between Sick and Well and How to Break Free. It's out today. Amy will be at the Barnes & Noble on Broadway and 82nd Street tomorrow night at 7 p.m. and then at Word Bookstore in Brooklyn on Thursday evening. But she's sitting right across from me in the studio. Amy, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
She wrote a book called Kicking Sick about your own health journey. Would you mind telling us a little bit about it?
Sure. The book or my health journey?
Your health journey.
Yeah. So when I was 14, I had really bad back pain kind of appear out of nowhere. And it was really sudden. And I went to a lot of different doctors and nobody could tell me what the root cause was. So it was the first time I really pivoted in my life to dealing with something health related. I was carefree and just full of life as a kid. And then all of a sudden I was 14 years old, which is hard enough as it is. And then I have this pain that nobody can explain to me. And so I just was put on medication to manage it. And then when I was 25, I went abroad to Israel, and it's as intense as it sounds. I gained 30 pounds in 30 days. I had rashes all over my skin. My hair was shedding. I could barely keep my breath. I couldn't keep food down. And it was like a state of emergency. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it was happening fast. And it led me to all of these Western-minded physicians, which is what I grew up raised and knowing. And then I could feel that I needed to help myself in a different way. So it sent me on a quest to Eastern medicine. I've landed somewhere in the middle and respect both. But I had an idea along the way to write my first book, Kicking Sick, which is a love letter from my heart to, at the time, 1 in 2 people with a chronic illness in our country. Because really all that I could find was how to be sick and tired. And that was just never something as a 25-year-old that I was ever going to subscribe to. It just did not feel right in every part of me. And along that way, I was better, and I did have diagnoses that are true, but I think my baseline was just off, and I didn't realize how much I was treading water until the press for Kicking Sick. I felt like I would go home and take a mask off and just crash.
Yeah.
And then that led me to going to my 36th doctor. That's not a joke. 36.
Wow.
Which takes a lot. I mean, I had a Harry Potter anthology of medical records. It takes a lot of energy, emotional strength. You're praying and hoping that somebody will tell you something that actually makes sense and that can really help you live fully. And I was lucky on 36, and he did all the testing and said, I'm really clear what's going on here, which I had never heard. And he said, you have late-stage Lyme disease and co-infections. And the good news is you will feel like you have a different body at the end of it, the treatments. And he was right. And it took a lot of strength and courage. But when he said the diagnosis, everything inside my body knew it was true. I knew it was true. And I was so proud of myself for not giving up on myself. But with that came a lot of grief of the years of my life that I had lost to searching for answers.
I'm curious what led you to write but you look fine. And how many times did you hear someone say, but you look fine?
A million. I actually have a Word document of all the invalidating statements because when I was considering what to name this book, I was like, it has to be something that feels really provocative, but also anybody dealing with an invisible illness hears all the time. But this one really just hit for me. So what happened was I started to get physically so much better. And the doctor was right and the treatments worked. But when I started to feel physically better, I started to feel bad in a new way. I had spent so many years in survival mode with my health at such a young age. And it was like my mind didn't get the memo that my body was better. Mm-hmm. So I was living in this state that I couldn't even explain. I didn't know what it was because there was no name for it. And I felt like almost in a prison inside my brain where I felt this hypervigilance, this extreme anxiety, this extreme fear that the other shoe was going to drop or that I have to manage things. I was obsessive. If I got scared, that everything would come back the way it was. And in my research, I realized that this is a really universal experience that just hasn't been named before. Mm-hmm. It's different than a post-traumatic stress disorder because it's not a singular event. It's different than complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is when the event happens over and over again. But what I call medical trauma brain in this book, the threat is your body.
Mm. We'll talk about that in a second. But what does it say to someone? You look fine. What does that mean to someone who has a chronic illness?
Well, one, it says that what you're experiencing is invisible and I don't see it. Mm-hmm. So it must be in your head. That's the message without the message, at least to me.
We're talking to Amy Kurtz, the author of the book, But You Look Fine. Listeners, if you'd like to get in on this conversation, give us a call. Have you had a health issue that's forced you to challenge yourself? What did you discover? Are you living somewhere between sick and unwell? How are you handling the stress? What have you done to help yourself heal? How have you altered your lifestyle to deal with your health? Or if you have a question for Amy Kurtz, our phone number is 212-433-9692, 212-433 WNYC. We live in this bifurcated society between being well and being unwell. When did you first discover these two polarities?
When I was physically better, I started to feel bad in a new way. And then I thought, well, society has this expectation that we're either sick or we're well, and that there's nothing that exists in between. And that's both impossible and frankly kind of insane because how is it possible to move on from a life-altering medical event without having to process what has happened to you? It's like the rug gets ripped out from under you and everything in your life, everything that you thought it would be, every relationship you have, everything changes. Mm-hmm. And you change so fundamentally. So the expectation that you get back up on the horse when the horse has left a long time ago isn't right. And then it compounds this further isolation, but similar to But You Look Fine. It's a messaging that we shouldn't be feeling bad because we're better and we should be grateful because we're well. And yet I found myself in a fresh hell between sick and well that I really couldn't name.
What were some of the signs that contribute to your mental trauma brain?
It was my husband who said that something was wrong first. We were on the worst date ever. This dude who'd been on the front lines of my chronic health journey, who is not a doctor, said, I think that you're struggling from another phase of this. And then I started to really look at myself and I did realize I'm so tense all the time. I feel so anxious. I feel like I have to control everything. I'm terrified at the onset of any kind of flare-up. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's going to go from 0 to 11 if I just loosen the grip at all. And it felt honestly like I was in a sandstorm desert, locked somewhere. And I describe this as what I call the Shadowlands because I would be with my friends. I would see my family. I was supposed to be grateful because I was better. And yet I was struggling in this way that I was feeling totally debilitated with a mask on. And there's really nothing. I think we have a loneliness epidemic in our country. And I can't think of anything that's more lonely than living with an invisible illness.
Let's talk about medical trauma brain. I looked it up, and it's funny. When you look it up, traumatic brain injury is what the research will bring back to you, or it'll bring you back injury or trauma. It's a terminology that you came up with. What is medical trauma brain as you see it?
It's the emotional, neurological imprint of having lived with a debilitating health condition.
What happens to you when you have this?
There's no part of you that isn't changed by navigating a difficult health experience. It's literally like the rug is ripped out from under you. And what I realized is this is universal. This isn't just for people like me with Lyme disease. It could affect the migraine sufferer who doesn't have hemiplegic migraines anymore, yet at the onset of any aura is laying down in a dark room. Or the cancer patient that has to go back for the scan. There's an intense fear that everything that you suffered through will come back. And I named it that because I couldn't find in all of my research anything that explained what I was feeling. And then when I talked to physicians, and I talked to so many of them, they would say, oh, now that you mention it, yeah, there is always that patient that is better but isn't acting as if they're better. And it's because your mind gets rewired when you go through something that stressful. And it's literally always scanning for threat. And for me, I felt like my mind was still on the hamster wheel, but my body got off. And I was just kind of existing in this weird limbo that felt like a fresh hell.
We've got a couple different texts here. This says, living with an invisible disorder and having people tell me you look fine helps me to understand the anger I feel that I've been suppressing for many years. I never give up, but the loss of time and years spent trying to get well never seemed to go away. Let's take a call. This person wants to be anonymous. They're calling in from Westchester. Okay. Hello. Thank you so much for taking the time to call. All of it, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for taking my call. Two things. One is when I learned that someone I hadn't known was dealing with a really serious illness, sometimes a life-threatening illness, and I thought that they did look very well. The thing I would say or have said is, if it's any consolation, you're looking very good, because I wanted to acknowledge that just because I couldn't see it didn't mean I didn't, recognize that they were ill. And from the responses I got, it seemed like I had not said the wrong thing, and I wondered what the author thought of that. And the other thing I wanted to say is I'm dealing with something very similar in that I just turned 68, and I, over the last few years, which included more than a couple earnest attempts to end my life, that I am profoundly neurodivergent, but not in ways that even fit the new formulas for neurodivergence. And, all that, oh, you're perfectly capable of doing that. This really resonates for me. When I really understood that, it made so many things make sense. And it was a huge help in that I don't think I'm ill. I think this is just the way I naturally am wired.
Thank you so much for calling in. And I did want to say that if you're feeling any sort of call 988, I should say. That is the self-help line for people who have suicidal ideations. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing your story. It's interesting. It was my last question for you. Like, for people who are supporting people who are in this situation and they think saying you look great is helping, and they get a response back, oh, thanks a lot. What would you say to them? What's a better way to help?
I love this question because nobody knows how to talk about it. Nobody knows how to act or support. It changes the relationship. Everyone's affected by the illness. But saying things like, how can I support you? Are you feeling any better? Is there anything you need me to do to be there for you? Or I'm so sorry that you're suffering right now. It's less about validating what a person looks like or saying that they seem to be okay. And it's more saying, I hear you saying that you're suffering and I believe you.
It was interesting because you know that medical professionals have been sort of like poking around this idea of medical trauma brain, specifically anxiety disorders. Have been poking at it a little bit, not giving it a name. How does fear and anxiety play a role in keeping you locked in the shadowlands, as you say?
Well, for me, it felt like I was stuck on a perpetual fear loop. I just couldn't get off. I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I think that that's a huge part of it. And from the 1,000 people that I interviewed, there was always this sense. Everybody shared the commonality of feeling afraid and feeling like their nervous system couldn't stand down. And what I think is really missing from the medical conversation is that there must be a recovery period and there must be nervous system retraining and regulating your nervous system. And the fact that that's not part of a conversation and how to fully recover is really detrimental because a lot of people are suffering in silence. And so many of us experience anxiety and fear. And it's interesting because the person that texted in, for me, myself, I realized I was actually really angry and I thought I was anxious.
Did you have grief over the life you lost over?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I think is the most important for anybody who's out there and struggling in this way is that it is essential to not pave over your pain. I was grieving the loss of the life that I thought I would have, of all of my dreams, of who I thought I'd become. And it's critical that you allow yourself the time and space and get help to really process that. And one thing I thought was interesting is that people say, I used to think it was my life before illness and after illness, and I never saw them. I saw them as separate. And just because it wasn't what I planned for myself doesn't mean that it's not mine and mine to learn from and mine to transform through. And I think that's a really important thing for people to hear because dealing with any kind of health challenge really shows you what you're made of.
I'm talking to Amy Kurtz. She's the author of the book, But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Hell Between Sick and Well and How to Break Free. If you'd like to join the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Have you had a health issue that forced you to challenge yourself? What did you discover? Are you living somewhere between sick and well? How are you handling the stress? Our phone number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. We'll be right back. You're listening to All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. My guest is Amy Kurtz, the author of the book, But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Hell Between Sick and Well and How to Break Free. Let's talk to Susan in Manhattan. Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for taking the time to call All of It. You're on the air.
Thank you. It's my first time. Oh, my. First of all, I'd like to thank your guest very much. I got sick at 25. And it was back in the 70s, so it was in a day where nobody had there was no medication. And it ended up after surgery finding out that I had Crohn's disease. But at the time, and for 10 years, they thought I had ulcerative colitis, which meant that I was in pain all the time. And, the fear was a bathroom fear. And nobody talked about any of this. So, it's not something I could talk about with people. Mm-hmm. And yes, I did look fine because cortisone makes you look fine. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you this, I learned a kind of compassion that people at the age when you have something like that, you don't have. And I also learned that almost everybody has something.
Yeah.
So my life isn't what I thought my life would be, but it's been pretty wonderful, despite.
Yeah. And
you get through something. But yes, I still want to know where the bathrooms are. And there's this constant fear, when you have something. I have a surgery that is now probably people don't have so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really interesting, Amy, because resilience is kind of a sticky wicket. You need it to get through, but it has a bad side when we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit what resilience, how it can work against you.
Well, we're prized in our culture for being resilient and pushing through things and achieving and pushing on and moving forward and pushing past things. But when you're dealing with a health challenge, you're forced into being chronically resilient, which puts you in a state of survival stress that is unnatural. And it allows you to bypass a lot of really important things that happen. Like sometimes you'll shelve bad behavior on the part of loved ones or physicians who don't know the right thing to say. And you're always like, I'll deal with it later. So you put all this stuff on a shelf. And then when you're physically better, it all comes up for the taking. And so I think that while we prize resilience, and yes, you have to be resilient to handle and navigate through a health challenge, it can become toxic when you have to constantly stay in that hyper alert state because it literally rewires your brain.
Let's talk to Linda. Linda has a question for you, Amy. Hi, Linda. Thanks so much for calling All of It. You're on the air.
Hi, how do you retrain your nervous system?
Hi. So I put a lot of this in the second part of my book, But You Look Fine. But there's a lot of different types of therapies out there, some of which are free where you can find videos. But it's really important to look into body-brain therapies like somatic experiencing, for example, which teaches you how to reconnect with your body and listens to its signals and not bypass them. So that's the first place that I would say to start. When you're dealing with a health challenge, you really override a lot of your body's instincts because you feel so stressed and like you have to just make it through to the other side. But part of healing and recovery is about starting to really listen to what your body is saying to you. And your body was smart enough to tell you something was wrong in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting because the second half of the book is titled Tools for Hearing. And you write that healing trauma and reprogramming your brain, it's not easy. Why do we fight it?
I think it's hard to understand that something's wrong in the first place because you've now adapted to this new way of being. So for me, like I said, I didn't even know anything was wrong. But your brain can be really powerful when it senses threat. And when you have an hypersensitive alert system, it can be really hard to say, okay, wait, I'm just going to take a break and see if this actually feels like an emergency. And I think that people go so fast to react once they've been through a trauma because they want to prevent what's happened to them already.
Let's take another call. This is Brendan calling in from the Bronx. Brendan, thank you so much for taking the time to call All of It. You're on the air.
I'm so grateful for you having me, and I could not be more grateful for you writing this book.
Oh.
I am a professor of medical ethics at a major academic institution, and my wife has been dealing with undiagnosed illness, a constellation of symptoms, bounced around from provider to provider. She's probably on doctor number 30 to 40, so she's getting close to where you were. And she's at her wit's end. I'm at my wit's end. I'm the most connected person I know, and I have connected her with so many different people. So I have two questions. One, I love the things you said about the kinds of words that can come out of my mouth. My wife is done hearing the words and she wants action, and I feel helpless. So what can I do? Two, what kind of doctor do you think is most capable of taking a holistic approach to undiagnosed illness?
Okay, great questions. And I'm so happy that you called in. I really feel that it's really hard to navigate relationships when you are dealing with a health challenge. It's really complicated. And again, nobody gives you tools for how to communicate through it. And it also changes the axis on which everything in your relationship functions from. And I think it's really important to, instead of trying to fix it, ask her what she needs. Ask her how you can be helpful to her. Ask her if there's anything you can do to make her life easier. And I'm sure that that would go a long way. And like I said, it's really important to not just try to make it better. What people often need is just somebody saying, I believe you and I see how hard this is and I want to help you in any way you need. That would make such a huge difference for so many people. If anybody thought, it's very uncomfortable to not know what to say and there is no language for this. So that would be my first answer. I hope that helps. And my second answer would be that it is really important when you're dealing with complex, especially invisible illnesses, to find a really great integrative doctor. So this could be functional medicine, but you want somebody who kind of holds the helm between the two and can really see all of you and all of your parts and try to create a healing plan based on that. And that's been the most helpful for me and a lot of the patients that I've seen with chronic illness is finding a really great integrative physician. But also, it's more than that because we're taught doctor knows best. And in some cases, they do. However, your wife knows her body better than anybody she's going to see, and nobody cares more about her getting better than she does. So it's really important, and I like to shift this narrative around patient empowerment to have her really think about what she needs from a partner in her health, because ultimately you have to be an empowered patient. You have to be with someone who trusts your instincts, who helps you reclaim your agency, who doesn't take it all from you and tell you exactly what to do. You have to be an active part of it. And just because somebody's the best at something doesn't mean it's the best for her.
Let's talk to Valerie from Manhattan. Valerie, thank you so much for calling All of It. You're on the air.
Oh, thank you so much for presenting this segment, and thank you so much for your wonderful book and courage here. I have a very similar story with Lyme. I spent a lot of years sick, at least once a month, and I finally found an integrative alternative physician who was just not taking no for an answer, not giving up. And I went on low dose naltrexone. And it took about 5 years before I could trust that I wasn't going to be sick every month. And later I went to acupuncture, and I did some Qigong practice and mental health therapy. But what I want to emphasize, what you're emphasizing, is the journey back to wellness is a long one sometimes, and it has different phases. And it needs different things at different times. And I think what happens when we go to Western medicine sometimes is they say, here's the doxycycline, in 6 weeks you should be much better. And there's a lot more there. And the anxiety piece that you brought up and the anger, I think, are so very important because they get trapped in the body. And I recently had another reoccurrence where I went through menopause, and I'm having a similar thing of, is this what my body's really going to be? Am I having a recurrence of Lyme? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling in, Valerie. I appreciate this. I do want to get to this before we run out of time. It's very interesting in this book. You talk about identity and the questions that come up around identity and some of the questions you asked yourself. You write, what role or identity do I feel I've lost? When I picture myself in the role or identity, what do I feel? What aspects or action of the identity or role are most important to me? What are some of the other ways I can potentially express those aspects and essences? What are some of the ways I can potentially experience those same or similar feelings? Are there any ways which my identity has shifted for the better with this new perspective? Why are questions like this important to consider?
I love that you asked this because when you're dealing with a health crisis, it's very easy for the identity to become a patient. And for me, I felt like a professional patient. I went from being an actress and seeing my life exactly where I saw it going to being a patient. And that became my identity because I was struggling for so long trying to figure out what was wrong and advocate for myself. And when the storm is over and the waters start to calm, you're left almost with an identity crisis. Like I almost saw my life with when there's a split in land and you see the two sides in a movie, that's how my life felt to me. And I didn't understand how to grow into who I was becoming. But what I want to say to anybody listening that this resonates with is illness can be an incredible teacher if you allow it to be. It literally makes you understand yourself so deeply. And anybody who's been through an illness will say that they got to know the most important person in their life, which is them. And I can honestly say on the other side that I'm so grateful for the experience. Not that I would wish it on anyone, but because it gave me a depth within myself that I would never have tapped, I would never have reached, I would never have learned about how there's so much I can do outside of a doctor's office to live well that I'm never going to give up on. And it can be the best teacher if you just, it's like an arrow. The only way out is through. And then there are blessings that can come with it too.
First of all, your book has helped me tremendously.
Oh.
I wanted to tell you that with my medical issue. So thank you so much for writing it.
Thank you.
The second is you will be at Barnes & Noble. Amy Kurtz will be at Barnes & Noble on Broadway and 82nd Street tomorrow at 7 p.m. And then at Word Bookstore in Brooklyn Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Third, I wanted to give the number for the 988 Lifeline. The number is 988 Lifeline. It connects you to trained crisis counselors 24/7. And finally, the book is called But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Hell Between Sick and Well and How to Break Free. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.